Life, in all its grandeur and complexity, does not come without its challenges. There is a season in every person's journey where darkness feels thick, when the weight of circumstances presses down so heavily that hope seems distant. It is in these moments that we often find ourselves trapped, not by physical chains, but by the invisible bonds of fear, worry, and confusion. You may be feeling isolated, unheard, or overwhelmed by situations beyond your control. This experience is universal, yet profoundly personal. It can feel like you are shouting into a void, and the silence that answers back only deepens your sense of despair. Recognizing this struggle is the first step towards finding true peace. Many try to ignore or suppress these feelings, convinced that faith means never experiencing doubt, never feeling sorrow, or never admitting weakness. But faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is acknowledging the struggle and still choosing to move forward. It's the courage to face reality with honesty before God and yourself. When you acknowledge where you are, you open the door to transformation. There is a beautiful transparency in the Psalms, especially in Psalm 142, where the writer openly pours out his soul, expressing his distress and loneliness. This psalm captures the heart of one who is surrounded by enemies, who feels trapped in a dark pit, yet dares to cry out to God. In this psalm, there is no pretense of strength or self-sufficiency. Instead, there is a raw, vulnerable admission of helplessness. This is where true healing begins, when you stop pretending that everything is okay and admit that you need help. Many people try to put on a brave face, wearing masks of confidence and control. They avoid speaking about their pain or struggle because of fear of judgment or rejection. But silence in the face of struggle only intensifies the internal storm. You might feel like no one understands what you are going through, or that your burdens are too heavy for others to bear. But even more importantly, you may feel distant from God, as if He is silent or absent. These feelings can create a cycle of isolation, making it harder to seek the help and peace you need. The struggle can come in many forms: financial difficulties that seem never-ending, relationships broken by misunderstanding or betrayal, health challenges that sap your energy and hope, or spiritual dryness where prayer feels empty and faith feels fragile. No matter the form, the experience is deeply disorienting. It shakes the foundation of who you thought you were and what you believed about life. In these moments, you may question your purpose, your worth, and even the goodness of God. But to acknowledge the struggle does not mean to surrender to it. It means recognizing that struggle is part of the human experience, and that it is okay to feel overwhelmed. It means giving voice to your pain and refusing to carry it alone in silence. When you do this, you begin a process of realignment, not just with your circumstances, but with God's truth about who you are. There is a freedom in admitting that you don't have all the answers, that you are not perfect, and that you need divine intervention. It is in this surrender that God's peace starts to take root. The act of honestly confronting your situation is a form of faith, because it requires humility and trust. You say, I am in this struggle, but I believe there is more than this moment. I believe God sees me, hears me, and will deliver me. Many great leaders, prophets, and faithful servants throughout history have faced similar struggles. They experienced seasons of loneliness, doubt, and despair. Yet, their greatness was not in their avoidance of hardship, but in their honest acknowledgement of it, combined with unwavering faith. This duality is powerful. It shows that you can be strong and vulnerable at the same time. You can cry out in your pain and still declare your trust in God. Acknowledging the struggle also means confronting any feelings of shame or guilt you may carry. Sometimes we think we should have it all together, that our struggles mean we are weak or failing. But struggle is not a sign of failure. It is often the soil in which growth and resilience are cultivated. By naming your struggle, you reclaim your power from it. You refuse to let it define you or diminish your worth. In this acknowledgement, you begin to see that struggle is not the enemy, but a signal, a call to deeper dependence on God, to greater self-awareness, and to the community that supports you. It teaches you humility and patience, and it prepares you for the peace that is beyond understanding. This peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God's strength in the midst of them. Even when the path ahead looks unclear, acknowledging your struggle positions you to receive the divine guidance and comfort that you need. It creates space for God's intervention in your life. The darkness feels less oppressive when you bring it into the light through prayer and honest communication with God. It is like a burden shared. Suddenly, it becomes lighter. So, if you are in a place of struggle today, know that it is not a secret you must hide or a battle you must fight alone. Recognize where you are, what you feel, and bring it to God. It is in this transparent honesty that the first seeds of peace are planted. You do not have to pretend. You do not have to have it all figured out. Just start where you are, and God will meet you there. When life's storms rage and your soul feels overwhelmed, the natural response is often to seek a solution. Any solution that can bring relief. Yet, before rushing to fix things with human effort alone, there is a profound invitation waiting for you to turn to God in prayer. Prayer is not merely a ritual or a set of words. It is the intimate act of opening your heart to the Creator, the source of peace and power. It is the lifeline that connects you from the chaos of your circumstances to the calm assurance of God's presence. Turning to God in prayer is an act of faith and humility. It says, I cannot handle this on my own. I need divine help. This admission might feel uncomfortable because it exposes your vulnerability, but it is precisely this vulnerability that God honors. Prayer is the sacred moment when you come as you are, with all your fears, doubts, and burdens laid bare before the one who knows you completely and loves you unconditionally. It is a conversation that does not require eloquence or perfection, just honesty and sincerity. In Psalm 142, the psalmist models this approach beautifully. He cries out, pouring his soul to God, expressing his desperation and need for rescue. There is no pretense or guardedness. He openly acknowledges his distress and places his trust in God's listening ear. This teaches us that prayer is not about using fancy words or reciting formulas. It is about coming before God with an open heart and being transparent about what we're experiencing. Many people hesitate to pray because they think their prayers must sound a certain way or be free of doubt. But God welcomes all forms of prayer, whether it is a shout of anguish, a whisper of hope, a plea for guidance, or even moments of silence. Prayer is your direct line to the divine. When you turn to God, you create space for His peace to enter your life. You invite His wisdom to illuminate your path and His strength to sustain you when your own power falters. Prayer also shifts your perspective. When you are caught up in the whirlwind of problems, it is easy to become fixated on what is wrong or what might go wrong. But prayer refocuses your heart and mind on the one who is bigger than any problem. It reminds you that you are not alone, that God is present and actively working on your behalf. This shift is crucial because peace begins with a change in perspective, from seeing yourself as overwhelmed and isolated to seeing yourself as supported and cared for by an almighty God. Moreover, prayer is a source of empowerment. It does not mean passively waiting for things to change, but actively engaging with God in partnership. When you pray, you invite divine intervention, but you also align your heart with God's will. This alignment brings clarity and courage to face whatever challenges come your way. You begin to sense that no matter how difficult the situation, you have a peace that anchors you, an unshakable calm that comes from knowing God holds the future. Turning to God in prayer is also a practice of dependence. In a culture that values independence and self-reliance, admitting dependence on God can be countercultural and humbling. This dependence is the pathway to true freedom. When you depend on God, you are released from the exhausting burden of trying to control everything. You can surrender your worries, fears, and plans into His capable hands and rest in His care. This dependence nurtures a relationship of trust. Like a child who runs to their parent in times of trouble, prayer develops intimacy with God. It is not a one-time act, but a continuous dialogue that strengthens your connection to the divine. Over time, you begin to recognize God's voice, feel His peace, and experience His presence more deeply. Prayer becomes not just a means to an end, but a source of joy and renewal. Turning to God in prayer also connects you with the spiritual reality that undergirds your life. The Bible teaches that God is always near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. This nearness is accessed through prayer. It is a moment when heaven meets earth, and your burdens are lifted beyond what words can express. Prayer invites the supernatural into the natural, allowing God's peace to penetrate your heart and circumstances. Sometimes, people struggle with the silence they perceive in prayer. They wonder if God is listening, or if their prayers make a difference. It is important to remember that prayer is not about changing God's mind, but about changing your heart and aligning with His purposes. Even when answers do not come immediately or in the way you expect, the act of prayer sustains you and prepares you for the breakthrough that is coming. In practical terms, turning to God in prayer can be as simple as pausing for a moment in your busy day, lifting your thoughts heavenward, and speaking honestly to God. It can be kneeling in the quiet of the night, or whispering a heartfelt plea in the midst of chaos. It can be repeating a short prayer of trust when anxiety threatens to overwhelm you. No matter the form, the key is intentionality and sincerity. Prayer is also a powerful tool for releasing your emotions. When you bring your frustrations, sadness, anger, and fears to God, you do not have to carry them alone. God invites you to cast your cares on Him because He cares for you. This act of surrendering your burdens is liberating. It frees your heart from the heaviness that drags you down and makes room for the peace that surpasses all understanding. In the process of turning to God in prayer, you become aware that peace is not something you manufacture. It is something you receive. It is a gift that flows from the presence of God when you invite Him in. Prayer opens the door for this gift. It is the channel through which God's peace flows into your heart, calming the storms and renewing your strength. In the midst of life's storms and trials, it is crucial to understand and embrace the truth that God is our refuge and deliverer. This is not simply a comforting phrase, but a powerful reality that can transform the way you face adversity. When you see God as your refuge, you acknowledge that He is a safe place, a shelter from the raging winds of fear, doubt, and chaos. When you see Him as your deliverer, you recognize that He is the one who rescues you, who breaks the chains that bind you, and who leads you out of darkness into light. The psalmist, in Psalm 142, vividly portrays this concept of God as refuge and deliverer. He is in a dark place, feeling trapped and pursued by enemies, yet he declares his confidence in God's protection and salvation. This declaration is a testimony born out of experience, a deep, personal encounter with the one who never abandons his children. God's refuge is not an abstract idea, it is a tangible reality that you can hold onto when life threatens to overwhelm you. To understand God as your refuge means to understand that there is a place beyond human turmoil where you can find rest. It is a sanctuary where your soul is safe, your fears are quieted, and your heart is restored. This refuge is not dependent on your circumstances improving immediately, but on the unchanging character of God. No matter how fierce the storm, no matter how dark the night, God's refuge stands firm and unwavering. It is a place of peace that the world cannot give and the world cannot take away. When you seek refuge in God, you are essentially running to the one who is greater than your problems. You stop relying on your own strength and start depending on His. This shift is critical because self-reliance often leads to exhaustion and disappointment, but reliance on God leads to renewal and hope. God's refuge is a stronghold, a fortress, a place of safety that protects you from the attacks of the enemy, whether those attacks come as fear, temptation, or discouragement. But refuge alone is not enough. God is also our deliverer, the one who actively rescues and sets us free. Deliverance speaks of movement, of being taken out of a place of bondage or danger into a place of freedom and safety. It is the promise that God will not only shelter you, but will also fight on your behalf and bring you through the battle victorious. This is the God who hears your cries and responds with power. He is not distant or passive. He is a mighty warrior who champions your cause. Deliverance is essential because there are seasons when you feel trapped, whether by circumstances, emotions, or spiritual attacks. You may feel like you are in a pit with no visible way out, surrounded by threats on every side. In these moments, God's deliverance is the lifeline that pulls you from despair into hope, from captivity into freedom. It is a reminder that no situation is beyond God's power to change. His ability to deliver you transcends human limitations and natural impossibilities. The experience of deliverance often requires faith and patience. Sometimes God's timing does not align with our sense of urgency, and waiting can feel like additional hardship. But deliverance is not merely about escape, it is about transformation. God's deliverance frees you not just from external pressures, but also from internal chains. Fear, guilt, shame, and doubt. He breaks every yoke that weighs down your spirit and restores your dignity and strength. To embrace God as your refuge and deliverer is to anchor yourself in His promises. Throughout Scripture, God reveals Himself as a refuge in times of trouble and a deliverer who never fails His people. This assurance is the foundation of faith. When you declare God as your refuge, you make a conscious choice to trust in His protection. When you acknowledge Him as your deliverer, you commit to trusting His power to bring you out of every challenge. The practical impact of this truth is life-changing. It means that in moments of fear or uncertainty, you can turn to God with confidence, knowing that He is both your shield and your sword. You do not have to face your battles alone, or in your own strength. Instead, you are invited to take refuge in His presence and rely on His mighty hand to deliver you. God's refuge is also a place of restoration. When you find shelter in Him, your soul is renewed, your hope is rekindled, and your courage is restored. This refuge becomes a source of strength to endure the trials that come your way. It is a safe harbor where you can pause, breathe, and gather your strength before stepping back into the challenges of life. Deliverance, then, is the outward manifestation of God's refuge. It is the evidence that His shelter is not passive, but active, not static, but dynamic. God's deliverance brings freedom and victory, showing that His refuge is a powerful place of salvation and hope. It reminds you that no matter how dark your current situation may seem, God is able to bring you out of it into a place of light and peace. Understanding God as your refuge and deliverer transforms how you live each day. You begin to face difficulties with a different mindset, one of confidence, not fear, one of hope, not despair. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, but as a victorious child of God, protected and empowered by His presence. This perspective enables you to walk boldly through life's challenges, knowing that the God who shelters you also fights for you. In every trial, God's refuge is the place you can run to, the safe place where your heart finds rest. In every crisis, God's deliverance is the power that breaks the chains and sets you free. Together, these truths form a foundation of peace and security that no storm can shake. One of the most remarkable and life-transforming realities you can ever grasp is that true peace is not dependent on your circumstances. Many people live their lives at the mercy of their situations, believing that peace comes only when problems disappear, when everything lines up perfectly, or when life finally goes their way. But the peace that God offers is far greater than any external condition. It is a supernatural peace that transcends the shifting tides of life and anchors your soul deep within. When you understand that peace is beyond circumstances, you begin to realize that it is not something earned or achieved by fixing every problem. This peace is a gift from God that rests on the foundation of His unchanging nature and promises. It does not rely on the absence of trouble, but is present amid the trouble. This means you can experience calmness in the middle of chaos, confidence in the face of uncertainty, and joy even in sorrow. The Bible describes this peace as the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. This is a peace that logic cannot explain and that worldly wisdom cannot replicate. It is a peace that guards your heart and mind, protecting you from anxiety and despair. This kind of peace is not passive or weak. It is a powerful force that sustains you and empowers you to stand firm, regardless of what is happening around you. Many struggle to find this peace because they look for it in the wrong places. They seek comfort in temporary things, money, relationships, achievements, or approval. These things may provide momentary relief, but cannot give lasting peace. The peace that God offers comes from a relationship with Him, rooted in trust and faith. When you place your confidence in God's sovereignty, goodness, and faithfulness, you tap into a source of peace that is unshakable. Peace beyond circumstances also means that you are not controlled by your emotions. Life's challenges often trigger feelings of fear, anger, sadness, or confusion. These emotions are natural and valid, but they do not have to dictate your state of mind. When you experience God's peace, you have the ability to rise above your emotions and rest in the assurance of His presence. This peace calms the storm within and gives you clarity and perspective. Another important aspect of this peace is that it comes through surrender. You cannot hold on to your worries and simultaneously grasp peace. When you surrender your concerns to God, when you truly release control and trust Him, peace floods your heart. This surrender is an act of faith, a declaration that God is in control, that His plans are good, and that He is working all things together for your good. Surrender opens the door for God's peace to flow freely. The peace that transcends circumstances also impacts your daily life in practical ways. It helps you make wise decisions because your mind is clear and focused. It enables you to respond to challenges with patience and grace instead of panic or frustration. It gives you strength to endure hardships without losing hope. This peace becomes a source of resilience that sustains you through trials and setbacks. When you learn to live with this peace, you become a source of peace to others. Your calmness and confidence in difficult times inspire and encourage those around you. You demonstrate through your life that peace is possible even when circumstances are far from ideal. This witness can be a powerful testimony of God's presence and power in your life. It is also important to remember that this peace is not a one-time experience, but a continual state. You cultivate it by daily choosing to trust God, by meditating on His promises, and by remaining connected to Him through prayer and worship. Like a deep well, this peace needs to be drawn from regularly. The more you practice resting in God's presence, the more your heart is anchored and your peace deepens. Even when troubles persist or new challenges arise, this peace remains steady. It does not mean you ignore reality or pretend everything is perfect. Rather, it means you face reality with a different heart, one that is grounded in the assurance of God's goodness and power. This peace becomes a stronghold for your soul, a refuge that holds you steady when everything else feels unstable. This peace is also linked to hope. When you have hope in God's promises, you know that your current situation is not the final word. Peace grows from the confident expectation that God is working behind the scenes, even when you cannot see it. It anchors you in the future and helps you endure the present with courage and joy. Understanding peace beyond circumstances transforms your relationship with life's challenges. Instead of reacting with fear or despair, you respond with faith and trust. You stop trying to control everything and start relying on God's power and timing. This shift brings freedom because you no longer carry the heavy burden of anxiety and worry. In Psalm 142, the psalmist's cry from a place of distress leads to a profound trust in God's deliverance and protection. This trust is the foundation of peace beyond circumstances. It teaches us that no matter how dire the situation appears, God's peace can fill the heart and mind, bringing calm in the storm and light in the darkness. Hope is the unseen force that propels us forward when the present feels uncertain and the past has left scars. It is the anchor for the soul, the light that breaks through the darkest night, and the assurance that better days are ahead. Embracing hope for the future is not merely wishful thinking or positive thinking. It is a confident expectation rooted in the faithfulness of God and His promises. This hope is transformative because it shapes how you view your life, your challenges, and your destiny. When you embrace hope, you make a deliberate choice to focus beyond your current difficulties and look toward the future with confidence. It is the decision to trust that the struggles you face today are not the final chapter of your story. Instead, they are part of a larger narrative that God is writing. a story of redemption, restoration, and victory. This hope fuels your perseverance and strengthens your spirit, especially in moments when giving up seems easier than holding on. The psalmist in Psalm 142, even in the midst of deep distress and isolation, embodies this hope. His cry to God is an act of faith that what he is experiencing is not the end. He turns to the one who controls the future and trusts that deliverance is coming. This posture is a powerful example for us all. When we face overwhelming challenges, hope anchors us to the truth that God's timing and purpose will prevail. Embracing hope for the future begins with a shift in mindset. Instead of dwelling on what has gone wrong or what might go wrong, hope invites you to see possibilities. It opens your eyes to the potential for healing, growth, and new beginnings. Hope breaks the cycle of despair by reminding you that your current pain will not last forever and that joy will come again. It lifts your gaze from the present storm to the horizon of God's promises. This hope also empowers you to take positive action. When you have hope, you are motivated to keep moving forward, even when the way is difficult or unclear. It fuels resilience, enabling you to face setbacks with courage and to keep pursuing your goals with determination. Hope does not deny reality, but faces it with confidence that God's grace is sufficient for every challenge. Moreover, embracing hope helps you develop patience and trust in God's timing. Life often unfolds in seasons, and some seasons are harder than others. Hope sustains you during the waiting periods, when answers seem delayed and progress feels slow. It reminds you that God's delays are not denials, and that His timing is perfect. This patient hope nurtures endurance and keeps your heart steady when the road ahead is uncertain. Hope for the future also transforms your relationship with fear and anxiety. When fear tries to paralyze you with what if scenarios, hope counters with the truth of God's faithfulness and power. It replaces worry with assurance, knowing that God holds your future securely in His hands. This hope is a shield that protects your heart and mind, guarding you against despair. Importantly, hope is deeply connected to the promises of God. The Bible is filled with assurances of God's love, provision, and presence. These promises are not vague hopes, but firm foundations on which you can build your life. Embracing hope means standing on these promises and believing that God will fulfill them, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. This confident expectation fuels your faith and keeps you anchored. Hope also invites you to envision a future that is not defined by past failures or current hardships, but by God's power to transform and restore. It encourages you to dream again, to set new goals, and to pursue your purpose with renewed vigor. This hopeful vision opens the door to possibilities that you might have thought were lost. It breathes life into your soul and inspires you to live with passion and purpose. When you embrace hope, you also embrace God's plan for your life. You align your heart with His will and trust that He is working all things together for your good. This alignment brings peace amid uncertainty and confidence amid chaos. Hope becomes a daily choice to rely on God's goodness and to expect His intervention. Hope impacts not only your inner life, but also your relationships and community. When you carry hope, you become a beacon of light to others who may be struggling. Your hopeful attitude encourages those around you and spreads strength and courage. This ripple effect can inspire a collective spirit of resilience and faith in your family, workplace, and community. In times of despair, embracing hope can seem challenging, but it is often in these very moments that hope is most powerful. It reminds you that you are not defined by your hardships, but by the one who has promised to bring you through them. Hope fuels your faith and activates God's power in your life, making the impossible possible. This hope is rooted in the reality that God is a God of new beginnings. He specializes in turning what seems like endings into fresh starts. When you embrace hope for the future, you align yourself with a God who makes all things new, who redeems brokenness, and who restores joy. This hope is a declaration that no matter how difficult your past or present, the future holds promise and purpose. As we reflect on these truths, we come to see that God's peace is not a distant dream, but a present reality available to each of us, no matter the storm we face. When we turn to God in prayer, we open the door to His refuge and deliverance, finding a shelter for our souls and a power that breaks every chain. This peace, surpassing all understanding, stands firm beyond our circumstances, anchoring us in hope and transforming the way we live each day. Embracing this hope for the future, we can face life with renewed courage, confident that God's plans for us are good and that His presence surrounds us always. In just 5 minutes, when you choose to lean into these promises, you can feel His peace washing over your heart, calming your mind, and renewing your spirit. Let this be your moment of encounter with the peace that only God can give. A peace that sustains, empowers, and carries you forward into a future filled with hope.